Hello, everyone, and welcome to Twimbit Immersions. I hope you're having a really, really busy day. And I'm Inderpreet, I'm your host from Twimbit. And as I say, it is that day of the week when we try to bring in the opportunity to think collaboratively about some of the industry issues, challenges, and even opportunities that are keeping the telco leaders up on their toes. And the topic today is, well, uh, do telco mergers and acquisitions live up to their promise or expectations? And to discuss this topic today, I have two guests with me, Arvind and Manoj. Hi, Arvind. Hello, Manoj.
Hi.
And
Hi.
Arvind Arvind Pandey is the ex Chief of Technology from Vodafone Idea. Manoj Menon is from Twimbit. He's the co-founder here. And before we proceed ahead, I'll quickly pass it on to Arvind. Arvind, quick words about your journey so far in the industry, please.
Thank you, Inderpreet, and pleasure to be here interacting with you guys. I have been into telecom for 3.5 decades, engineer MBA, BITS planning, U21 Singapore MBA, and into multiple verticals like research development, technology, and telco side. So I have seen that Vodafone Idea merger, which brings a lot of challenges and opportunity, as you said. So happy to discuss that.
Thank you, Arvind. Manoj? Uh,
Excellent. No, thank you. I think great to be here. I think the topic is so relevant because across the region, in Asia, the region that Twimbit research team is covering, we see consolidation now happening at a frantic pace. It started with Indonesia, where you saw, Indosat merge with Hutchison, and prior to that, in India, you have Vodafone and Idea merging. We have similar scenario emerging in Thailand, almost every country, because the amount of investments that is needed to fund the 5G infrastructure rollout and to make a solid business case with 5G. I think we do not have much of a choice but to start seeing more consolidation. So while the mergers begin with so much of expectation, we will save so much cost, we will create so much more value. The question we want to really address is, hey, is that really possible? Do these mergers actually deliver? And for the guys who are looking at the next set of mergers in other countries, how do they plan for it? And that is why I think this conversation came up. Obviously, Arvind has been in the thick of the action, so he has he has fresh bruises from all the learnings that happened through his work in India. So we hope that through that process we can learn. So great to have you, Arvind, on that. Yeah. So back to you,
Thank you.
Thanks, Manoj. And yeah, you've absolutely said it. We have Arvind with us, and Vodafone Idea, if I remember, this was the largest merger that has happened in the Indian telecommunications industry. The number 2 and the number 3 operators, they came together to form, a collective organization. Of course, the scale of it was huge. And today, we are hoping that we will hear, some of your real-time experiences, Arvind, that you've managed, while you were handling or when you were overseeing this activity at Vodafone Idea. Before we deep dive into that, let me just quickly set some context, although Manoj has said some bit of it. But and we are hearing a lot about telecom mergers and acquisitions happening all across the globe. And that perhaps also gives us some kind of indications to what is the state of the industry as of now. On one side, if we look at the revenues, the growth is declining year on year. And of course, we don't see or we don't predict revenues to be growing in 8 to 10% range, maybe 1 to 2% over the next 5 years. That having said that, if we look at the industry, there's an unprecedented kind of transformation that has happened. Now, I say that because if you look at the entire internet value chain, what was connectivity as a part of it in 10 years before, maybe 50% of the entire value chain was contributed by connectivity in 2010, and if you look at it today, it's about 25% of the entire value chain, which in itself says new kind of competition has emerged, so and telcos have to take care of that. On the other hand, if you look at the amount of data consumption that has grown on the networks, it has surged like anything, and that calls for new investments, not just to maintain your existing infrastructure, but also to keep up with what is happening with 5G transformations. You have to have a 5G play, and you have to have investments there as well. Step outside the network business, maybe telcos also have to compete with the digital providers, so they have to have a digital strategy in place. What kind of digital services they would want to offer, what kind of adjacencies do they want to get into and play. That puts a lot of pressure on telcos, I believe, and that's why I think it's leading to lot of mergers and acquisitions happening in the industry now. Well, of course, mergers and acquisitions could be the next logical step for telcos to deal with profitability, but yes, the question remains how successful these M&As could be, and could they live up to their expectations or the promise. And I think from there I'll just pass it on to Arvind to hear his views, and perhaps my first question could be, what could be some of the measures for a successful M&A?
Yeah, I think great question. Yeah. So Arvind, how should you measure success, of a merger, pre-merger? How do you measure the success? Is it cost saving the key rationale?
Sure. Thank you, Manoj and Inderpreet for the great question. So yes, cost is an ingredient and a major factor, no doubt about it. Having said that, I think pre-merger, what is a clear written on the wall is how do you complement each other to see five things. One is how do you shorten the go-to-market to the customer, because it's a early mover advantage. That is one important aspect. Second important aspect is that how do you make sure that you're all set to introduce a technology, new technology, because every couple of years there is a new technology, especially from India perspective. So how do you quickly introduce you? That is the second part. Third part, which is what Inderpreet touched upon very lightly, so that it's not going to be a cellular based network or a telco. It's going to be a digital based network where it is very, very important to transform the network in a way that you are able to have a seamless experience. And fourth important point is, having said that, how do you optimize your capital expenditure, because money and resources are scarce. So it is very important to make sure that you leverage in a way that you have a better ROI. And finally, the fifth point, which is very important, is how do you make sure that customer pays a little more than what he's paying now, in a way which is have been challenged in India, that how do you make sure that from 114 rupees it goes to 130 and then 150 and so forth. So what is that quantitative and qualitative experience you're giving to the customer? So these are the top five drivers. For sure, cost is important aspect, but definitely these are the key driver one can think of compelling reason for the merger.
Excellent. Yeah.
So, what could be some of the, if we have to look at some of the factors I need to keep in mind before even I, step into post merger or during merger kind of discussions? What could be the prerequisites to those discussions?
Yeah, pre-merger. So let's discuss post-merger later. But let's say pre-merger. What are those critical questions that we need to keep in mind? Because now you have seen through that merger, so you can tell us, oh, I wish before the merger we had even thought about it.
Yeah. So I think one important aspect which is clearly underlining the entire thing is spectrum consolidation. That is the jewel in the crown of any telco. So it is a complement situation where a operator A or operator B has got complementary spectrum, and the power is not just the 2x, but it is 10x. And the reason why I'm saying 10x, because what happens if you create a capacity, you are able to do it in a much cumulative and cascading impact where you get a customer experience, you get more customers, you increase your capacity and equipment and so forth. So this is what my practical experience is, that it is not 1 plus 1 is a 2x. It is 1 plus 1 actually is 10x, where you are able to create a big capacity, ROI and input and stuff like that. So the time to market becomes very, very important. That is one important aspect one has to consider for merger. The second important aspect one need to consider is, because if you do not control your operating expenditures, for example, if there is an operator which is 10 years old legacy carrying 2G or 3G, which globally people have seen, then it's going to get phased out. Now, if you have the TARs, if you have the play technology, which is other guy is also having it, it's kind of a duplication, but cost ARPU is going down, cost is going increasing up. So how do you complement from the technology and the TAR point of view is also one need to look at the merger point of view. The third, which is very important aspect, is the revenue enhancement. So for example, if I'm doing a 30,000 crore rupees for a year, and operator B is doing around 40,000 crore, can I sum that up and see how can we create 80,000 crore revenue, which I would have taken otherwise for next 10 years or so. And finally, the important aspect is that what is the capex ROI one need to incur. So for example, if I'm investing a 10,000 crore rupees capex per year, and so is the other operator, how do you make sure that it is not 20,000 but it is 13,000, but a better experience and better quantitative and quality experience. So before pre-merger, we really need to make sure. And the last point, which is very important, is the human aspect, the software aspect part of it. Whatever you do, it's in theoretical paper, unless you ensure that the culture and the kind of consolidation and merger, setting up the right mandate, focus, and the people, you have to really take care of that pre-merger before it gets to a stage where it is impossible to come back. So these are the multiple aspects, not the all for sure, but very important aspect one need to consider to make sure that there's a homework being done before it gets to the action as such, Manoj.
Can you clarify that a bit? What do you mean by 1 plus 1 equal to 10? Like, especially from the spectrum standpoint, means,
Yeah.
are you saying that, how do we say that the spectrum is complementary? You know, what are the pitfalls? Like, what is the mistake that has been made in the past?
Yeah. So for example, if I have a 5 megahertz spectrum, and if I'm able to get, let's say, uh, one tower, one GB per site, kind of per GB kind of a thing. And the moment what happens, if there's a 30 to 35 subscriber latching on to one tower, it becomes 40 or 50. Actually your download goes down, and your data download per MB goes down. Your ARPU starts eroding down. Your experience goes down. So in a way, what you have been achieving, let's say 100 rupees per tower, will actually go to 60 or 70 rupees. So in a way, it's a bad experience. In a way, it is a bad word of mouth. But what happens if you increase that 5 plus 5, 10 megahertz, what you're doing is you are actually increasing your carrier aggregation gain, the features and stuff like that, where you are able to give a much better experience advantage. Then what you are able to do is you are able to provide the capacity where you need a denser cell. However, if you don't do that and spread across everywhere, you actually are creating a capacity, but you are not utilizing. For example, in one of the merger I've seen, if you create a capacity and you're able to leverage only 60%, what happened in case of Vodafone Idea, it's a sunk capex. However, if you deploy the features and the capacity, the new equipment, wherever it is required for, your experience becomes not 2 times, but 10x time. And hence the capacity technology like massive MIMO required, you keep adding it, and rather than 2x, you get into the 10x capacity. So that example, just to take example, in Malappuram, it was like 1,000 terabyte per day. It's a small town, but takes up lot many data capacity. And the moment there was a consolidation, it started with that 4,000 terabyte. So it's like 1x, not 2x, but going to 4x. And if you provide that capacity, small cell, and wherever it is required, and more importantly, the application, I think you're not talking about data volume at all. What you're talking about is a content application, which is what is going to happen in a digital transformation. So your 4x actually will become 10x. And that is where I'm saying the power of spectrum, the power of experience, the power of capacity utilization, which is what the vendors are eyeing and bullying about. How can you get a 10x capacity unless you have a subscriber and the people who want to download? So you have spectrum, but you don't have equipment to put that. So that's where I'm saying it's a power which is spectrum can be leveraged in.
And you have actually seen that there is growth in subscriber base near a particular area where the spectrum efficiency has improved.
Exactly. That's what I said. Malappuram. It's a small town, and I'm sure you'll be aware of in Kerala. And Vodafone Idea was very bullish, but it was so that the people were starving for the capacity. The moment you add the spectrum, it really blows on. And that's where I think people like places like Bangalore, it used to be like 2,000 terabyte per day, and you add the capacity in spectrum, it went down to 4,000 to 5,000 and moved on to 10,000 even. So and Airtel, by the way, used to be is leader over there and used to be around 15 to 20,000 terabyte. So as far as the data capacity, demand, user experience, it is there, and people are happily wanting to use that. It's just that the power of spectrum, the power of consolidation, the power of user experience is what is required to be done. That's the beauty and the power of consolidation and merger, which can be done rightly so.
And you mentioned another one, sixth point, I think you mentioned was culture. So like, do you say that, oh, if the culture is very dramatically different, you don't pursue the merger at all? Is that even a consideration? Is that even possible to say?
Yeah, if I would be given a hot seat, I will say definitely that is point number one. Because all said and done, it is the people who drive the change. If people are not accepting the change, nothing is going to happen. That is one important aspect. People should be willing to change, people should be willing to accept, and people should be seen as transparent, not to be transparent. The important aspect is that when the merger happens, there is a lot of fear factor across the people. What is going to happen to me? There's a duplicacy. What is, and if they do not are given a comfort factor and from the cultural transformation, from the leadership perspective, it actually gets down what people were there earlier. So you don't go, and this is what I was talking to Indosat Hutch merger, that people start with like 100%, but surely it will go down to 90 and 60 or 70%, and the curve will go up to 70, 80, and probably establish to 80%. So does the merger leave it to 100%? Clear answer is no. Does it stays to 80% with the good merger? Answer is yes. And the only way to do it with the people's management alignment and then making sure that the right people get the right job, that is one important aspect. Also related with the mindset of the people, whether somebody is a managed services and somebody is in-house. So the mindset and the culture of the people is very, very different. Can you bring them across? Very difficult. Can you bring them a new culture? Difficult, but can be done. So I think this is one software aspect which everybody has to wear a HR hat and then see whether how to make sure that people are comfortable.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah. I think that clearly talks about achieving those synergies and thinking about those synergies before you get even into the merger talks or looking at the mergers. And it could be from both cost perspective and from the revenue perspective. And well, let's move a bit into the merger kind of discussion. So what happens during, when the merger is ongoing? What sort of tactical decisions executives are faced with as they proceed with these mergers?
Great question. I think what is most important is a third eye principle in merger and acquisition. Somebody has to make sure that the conflicting interests are taken care in a way which is collaborative to make sure that there is one goal, which is merger acquisition for one single unified company. So for that perspective, it is very important to set up a program management office with different offices like network, with sales and marketing, program management, project management, and then vendor management, contract management, and process. You name everything. You need to have a clear control, not the operator A, not the operator B, but a operator A and B with a different name. So that's something which is very, very important aspect to make, and that program management office make sure that whatever promises have been done, try to make it to 80, 70%, if not 100%. So this is something very, very important, and that needs to have a vertical SMEs and OME to make sure that they understand the ground rule, they write the ground rules, ensure that it is done in a way which is collaborative, productive, and taken care of the software aspect. So that's one important aspect. The second important aspect, and maybe this is something which is a debatable point, that you need to what happened, the merger acquisition, there are two players, we are competing each other. Can they complement and become a one single team with two different brand? Answer is no, because the mindset to compete for last 10 to 12 or 15 years cannot change overnight. So I think if I would be driving a hot seat, it's separately a different brand, different loyalty, different ownership, and different incentives to the retailers and the people who need to make sure that the brand is prevalent in a single unified one. So the moment that happens, the loyalty to X or Y company changes. So that's the second important aspect which people need to take care of. The third important aspect, which is complementary or contradicting aspect, while it is very important from a network point of view to reduce the cost. Okay, because if it is 10,000 crore plus 10,000, 20,000, and the expectation aspiration is to bring down to 12,000 to 13,000, rightly so. But if you bring that across to within, less than a period what is expected to, it is going to do more harm than its own advantage. So for example, if there are 10,000 sites in Bihar and 10,000 sites for operator A and B, and you want to achieve 12,000 sites, if you shut that off, you'll get advantage of around for 50,000 rupees to 1,000 per month, for example. But if you shut that down, trust me, all your customers will vanish. So while on one side you will achieve 10 rupees, but on the other side you will lose actually 1,000 rupees. So do you want to do that in a way which is surgical? Definitely not. Do you want to do in a way which is clinical? And that's where I think it is important to strike a balance between the cost reduction, customer experience, capex introduction, and making sure that all the functions like network, sales and marketing, finance, and the other functions are able to do that. So that is where I think it is important to make sure that all the programs which are driven by finance team, for example, cost reduction, is seen by the marketing and sales to make sure that it is done. So that's another important aspect. The last important aspect, which is very, very important, is to see how do you ensure that there's a quick corrective action. Because what happens, even if the big force comes in and they make a big blueprint, it is not going to work. I mean, I may be a little blunt about it, but that's the ground reality. What you need to have is a very corrective action, quick mechanism from the ground to have a quick feedback to make sure that it is implemented according to the what is specifically required for the company. So that these are the some key drivers I think one has to take care during the merger and make sure that it goes on the track, not get derailed.
I think a great point, Arvind. I want to probe a bit further on the multiple brand situation, right? So you said it is important that both the brands are consolidated ASAP so that the whole organization is working on a united brand. But there are people who say, now every telecom company is trying to have multiple brands, maybe create a sub brand in some instances for digital stories, right? So when you have invested so much in building these multiple brands, there are people who argue that maybe it is worthwhile to keep those separate marketing engines, but the underlying network infrastructure is the same so that you can still cater to maybe two very diverse segments. So you can tell us a bit more about the rationale, why you believe it is so critical to merge the two brands, and what is the practical reality on ground that needs to be addressed proactively, because I see many companies maintaining two brands.
Very good point you picked up, Manoj. And you're absolutely right. The kind of merger Vodafone and Idea had, it was actually very complementary from brand perspective. It was rural perspective where Idea had a leadership. It was metro where Vodafone had the leadership. Can you work these two brands? Definitely yes. The problem which starts that the retailers and the incentive and the people who are handling. So somebody is that zonal manager who was handling the Idea, he will not change overnight to promote the Vodafone brand, and people in the market will get confused whether it should be Idea brand or Vodafone brand. And if the leadership is there in let's say in rural side, do you want to kill that Vodafone brand? Not really, because you have owned your customers. So what happens to that guy? Will he be chasing the Idea brand or a Vodafone brand? However, if you move to the digital transformation and create a brand which is not their legacy wise product, but a separate enterprise product. And that's where I think the leadership should work on, to make sure that a new product, new innovation, new content, new application should have a new branding. So does it need to kill that overnight, when given the fact that it has been spent multiple number of years? Definitely not. But that gradual change should see the market pulse. That's why I said it's a closed loop behavior, customer behavior, which you need to dictate to make sure that you have a quick corrective action. And the more delay you do, the less greater impact you have. And actually, it's a cascading impact. So that's where I think the sensitivity and the uh, equation works with branding.
Correct. Now, is there any opportunity to leapfrog in any way when a merger happens, because something like this scale is happening, and there is an opportunity to transform and reduce network overall cost for the combined entity significantly? Or is there any such opportunity that comes about because this merger is happening, and therefore maybe here are three things that go beyond cost to achieve now a new kind of a benefit? Is there something like that that people should keep in mind?
This is a great question, and this is what I had pitched in some of the mergers which happened in the Celti or Indosat, for example. So while it is important to stop the leaky bucket, because leaky bucket, what I call, if the OPEX is A plus B, you need to have A plus B minus delta. So you have to stop the leaky bucket, keep doing in a way that happens. However, you need to put some water to make sure that your revenue, whatever is erosion, is also tough. And that's where the beauty of this merger is, and rightly so for globally, that a digital transformation, people moving from seller transformation to digital transformation, where your workloads are in the public cloud, your OSS, BSS on the on the cloud, your entire license is actually pay on a grow basis. You have a capacity which you can leverage, and you can have an open RAN for the 5G, where you can have a digital unit, control unit. You have not only the voice and data, but you have Industry 4.0 to connect multiple connectivity and machine to machine kind of thing. You have LLTC, low latency devices. So there will lot many opportunity which you will not be purview to if you invest capex. But if you cannot invest capex, given the fact that you are getting coiled with the legacy and you need to shut off your legacy, the only way to get off the legacy is to, one, do the consolidation and do the cost reduction. Other side is put it multiple aspects to get to the new product innovation and services, which you probably will miss the bus in case you don't do it today. And that is the power of the merger, which brings that I am not a legacy anymore. And you have seen that globally, that there's a digital transformation and people are now moving to enter B2B model, not B2C model. So telcos in their own way, and you have seen that in Bharti Airtel, that the enterprise business is coming like a big way. So I definitely believe that the enterprise business, the non-telco business, and some of the stuff which they would not be purview to will come. To do that, there's a lot of digital transformation required. Cloud adaptation, application programming interface, Kubernetes, all those things are likely to come, which they need to transform themselves, which will come with the merger.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah.
A little bit on the infrastructure side, Arvind, you mentioned about, vendors. Now there are two different operators who have different vendors, either for their network or for, their IT contracts. How do you deal with that situation? And particularly so because these contracts might be long-term in nature, how do you tackle that situation?
This question came very sequential to what Manu said, and that's exactly the problem we need to tackle within the merger acquisition. On one side, we want to introduce a new technology, and other side, we are tightly coupled with the contract, and you just can't open it. So therefore, one side you need to shut down the tower, on one side you need to shut down one of the mobile switching center and the equipment, but other side you are just coupled with the contract. And that is where I think the software skills, contract management, vendor relationship, introducing a new vendor, reopening the contract, make sure that you pay them well in a way that they are not offended. So this is something which is required to be done, not just the network, not just the customer experience, but also the backend part, where a supply chain management and the finance team make sure that there is a partnership relationship with the vendor, and willingness to open the contract, willingness to take the heat somewhere if it case to, and then move in a long-term relationship basis. That is where I think the power of the success of the merger acquisition happens. So like one of the thing what you talked about pre-merger, and probably I missed this point, that with the pre-merger, the vendors, the partners, and this is what in Bharti Airtel, Mr. Mittal used to say, if you don't take care of the vendors, partners before you do anything, you probably will not succeed. And that's exactly the beauty of merger acquisition. I think this is what you need to take care of.
Yeah, maybe, so if you were the CEO now of a company, and you are pursuing the merger, Arvind, and you had a clean sheet. Let's say you are the number 3 operator in a country. You want to acquire number 4, which gives you a chance to become number 2. This is most likely the situation in every country. And you are the CEO. What will, in a quick summary, what will you do pre-merger to, what will be a couple of things you will keep in mind? What will be the decision you will say, maybe I will not even go for the merger because it's going to be a disaster? And what will be the top 3 things you will do? I think you have summarized it all, but it'll be good to capture it in a nice sequence.
Yeah, so my point of view, operating model is very, very important. What is the operating model with both the companies? Because that is where the contract opening, the management software part, and the relate. So that part is one. Operating model is very, very important. The second is the aspiration to grab the technology, because there are laggard vendors, operator, there are very aggressive. So if the appetite to go to the new technology where there is a big opportunity waiting, if that culture and mindset is not there, I will not go for it. The third, which is very important, is that what is my infrastructure currently for both that. So can I leverage spectrum, transmission, core network, CRM system, SAP system, anything which is related with making sure that it goes to the cost reduction for the cloud. I would want to make sure that whatever there in theoretical, can I achieve it? So something like doing a pilot before I take a call on and those cost reduction. And fifth, very important, is if I am going to the new technology, I want to take an early mover advantage. Am I aspiring becoming number 2 where there is another players who are already have a big muscle power, and I am just thinking I'll be able to do that. So competitive landscape and next horizon for 3 to 4 years is very, very important. And finally, a partnership model. So if I have to go for a content or a application base, do I have a partnership with big data people? We do have a partnership with the internet folks. Do I have a internet exchange? Do I have a ILD? All those things I need to see to make sure that whatever blueprint I have for next 2 years from the revenue and investment and cost reduction point of view, am I able to achieve that or not? So these are the some top 4 or 5 things I would like to see that, Manoj.
Excellent. Yeah.
That's interesting. Now, I think now we can move to post-merger. And if you have to look at some sort of benchmark, these were the goals I've decided before we get into the merger. And now we are in this stage after the merger. What is the right benchmark which, we can use to measure where we have landed?
Yeah, so this is really something when the merger happens or the pre-merger happens, there is such a long, strong motivation that everybody is charged up and probably overdoing things the way it has got to be done. But when the post-integration or a merger, people tone down their energy, people are little, less motivated because there are not results what probably was expected to. So my suggestion, or if I would be benchmarking it, if it is 100%, I think 70% is a very good, 70 to 75 is an ambitious target. Definitely 80% is far exceeding expectation, but beyond going 80% from is something which I think it's very, very hard to work on. So that's the broadly, this is in this kind of a various parameters: revenue, cost reduction, program management, time to implement, contract management, or even technology introduction, new product services. So there could be multiple lenses. It could be 70% somewhere, 80%, but it should be hovering around that range in the page.
Any questions, Manoj, on this?
No, I think So we get this. So you are saying be even happy with 70 or 80% of the goals that we set out to do. Now, if you come to, let's say, how realistic is it? Because you know when you so if you go to the merger cycle, uh, how quickly should the new brand be announced? Is it you announce it on day one of the merger, or you need to announce it within a certain time frame? Then what are the expectations of this journey to success? Over the next 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. If you can help distill that a little bit more.
Sure, and this is very good. So I think 1 quarter you must really observe the market, give opportunity to observe how people are reacting to this merger acquisition. That's very, very important. Don't react or rather overreact before the market gives you the direction. So that is one clear input from my side. After you are able to see how people are seeing this merger acquisition, the power of merger, and what you need to do is take that expectation and then align in some of the market where you want to see the early success of it. Because if you open up the entire thing, it's not going to work, Manoj. You have to really make sure that, for example, if I'm strong in Delhi, I will really open that Delhi and see and make sure that there's a success story. The moment you have a success story in a urban market, suburban market, or a rural market, the word of mouth spreads, and that's what I think it could be strength, it could be weakness. If you are able to get a success and give that message to market, hey, I am one strong brand in this market, and I want to duplicate to bring you that power and bring you that experience. People will accept your brand, and that is where I think that is one. Third is not a brand, but product and services. Rather than getting it stuck up in a brand, you should give. I used to get a 1 GB per month. I'll give you 2 GB per month. Would you accept it? Will you take that? And just with 1.2 price, people will happily accept it. And then you say, by the way, this is a new brand. So would you accept it? They'll say, yeah, I will accept. So it's like seeing is believing. You go and sell a product and service, test that water, and then you say establish a new concept or a new brand which is not competing with your old legacy brand, because that what you're doing is you are consolidating the power of both the brands and then making sure that it is done. So these are the something in terms of timeline. Like I said, 1 quarter observe it, second quarter pilot, and then third quarter establish yourself, and fourth quarter in an auto mode. So lump sum, normal, auto, that's the typical a operator would want to do, so that there's a quick corrective action, and there is nothing right or wrong in this particular. It is the way the market, your loyal subscribers want to behave. Otherwise, a cascading impact can lead to a negative impact also. So in short, the merger process is between 6 to 18 months. Don't expect anything less than a year is what my belief. And
yeah. So we have talked about many of these mergers, which are companies doing almost similar propositions, and the merger was motivated from a cost perspective in most cases. Yeah. But now, I think the next wave of mergers, clearly there is a lot more excitement coming up with fixed mobile convergence, for example.
exactly.
Right? There is some excitement coming up with enterprise business. And so these now are not competing existing businesses. These are different businesses that you integrate into your portfolio. So what are the lessons from this that we could apply? Let's say if a large mobile company is acquiring a fixed, let's say a cable television company or a fixed internet company, or a large mobile company is now acquiring a fairly large enterprise business in a particular country. So what are some of the things that we could apply, or what are critical, or what is different, or what is similar?
Very good question, actually, because telco historically has been either a marketing company for the retail or a network infrastructure owned company. However, the content application and the big data company, their strength is and proximity to the customer, and then make sure that there's a revenue enhancement. So if you leverage the backend part of managing the network and leverage the process automation stuff, which is typically a telco is good at, and leverage the proximity to the customer, the product and user experience, and then use the same brand and leverage the network infrastructure to give a better experience, this is going to be terrific win-win scenario. And this is something very different to the voice model, like you rightly said. Now that branding can be same because there is no competition, people are used to it, and if they get a better experience, they will definitely go for it. So that's a very emerging model, and I think very important aspect, which is very different with some of the merger which has happened and not so successful. But in this case, it will be really, I feel it will be a very successful model. Manoj. Great point.
Okay, fabulous. So, what is your outlook now? When you think, when you look into the future, do you see that with this pressure now, we have 5G licensing coming up in India, for the more spectrum is being released. I think the pricing is again going to be high. So, are we going to see another round of consolidation? You think most countries can accommodate one or two operators? In Malaysia, you have a single wholesale network. What is your thinking? What is your views on these topics?
Yeah, again, I think this is very relevant question. One, of course, on a global view, merger acquisition will continue to happen because cost reduction, technology deployment, customer experience, ARPU enhancement, whatever you talk about. So merger acquisition will happen. Now, only thing is that merger acquisition will happen in the way it was happening. Answer is no. What will happen that there will be some overlapping understanding that there will be a partnership and model will change. So, for example, if the telco is not purview to what you talked about, the big data or television on the fixed line, they would want to collaborate and do a partnership approach. So, in a way, it will become the partnership model will change, landscape will change, whether it's a merger or a partnership or synergy. I'm not sure about it, but that is something which also will come. That is very important aspect. The third important aspect is sharing model, because network infrastructure sharing is written on the wall. It used to be passive infrastructure. Now people are very careful that how do I improve upon, whether I do a merger acquisition, can I share the same active infrastructure? And if the government is doing that, why not to do that? So I definitely see a network sharing perspective to bringing the cost rather than getting a close, merger acquisition kind of. That's a third model. Fourth model is, which is very important, is to see how the non-telecom players can play a major role by doing a merger acquisition. For example, if there's a Tata Motors and if they see that Mercedes-Benz, the T-Mobile has worked there and the model has worked, that could be another model to set up an enterprise for them dedicated. And it may not be a merger, but only the entire thing, and the Tata Motors funding some of the part, and the spectrum is being shared or outlet or given the electronics. So these are some of the things which will keep changing the dynamics in one or the other form, taking the merger or acquisition in a different perspective, Manoj.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Arvind. I think, yeah, that kinds of, if I have to relate it to what is happening with the sharing economy, that is where maybe, if we have to improve the utilization of telco assets, that is where we are heading. And that's where, the nature of M&As will head to, perhaps from merging the two, maybe a more collaborative or partnership kind of business models would emerge. So thank you so much, Arvind, for joining us today. It was a great interaction. I think we learned a lot of new things. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for joining us, Manoj. And for our listeners, I think join us next Thursday again. We have another interesting topic for you. Next Thursday, we would be discussing telco data centers and is it the right time for telcos to divest data centers? So see you again next Thursday. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Manoj. Thank you, Indrapreet.
Hey, thank you very much. Yeah, bye-bye.